CCJ's 1044 is brought to you by Chevron Dello Heavy Duty Diesel Engine Oil. Now there's even more reasons to choose Dello.
What are the cargo theft trends coming into 2025, and what can fleets do about it?
You're watching CCJ's 1044, a weekly webisode that brings you the latest trucking industry news and updates from the editors of CCJ. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you'll never miss an installment of 1044. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Jason Cannon and my co-host is Matt Cole. Cargo theft has been a major issue for trucking and logistics for a number of years, but since the height of the COVID pandemic, theft activity has skyrocketed all around the country.
A lot of that increased activity goes hand in hand with the increase in freight fraud seen throughout the industry. Cargo theft has grown to be much more than just the physical theft of trucks, trailers, and freight, but just how bad has cargo theft become?
The state of cargo theft right now is bad, to put a little bullet point on it. But if you want a little summary of what's been happening, I mean, we've been seeing increases on increases, right? Not just continued increase, but acceleration. We're hoping at this point that we may start to see a leveling off, but that leveling off is in no way due to like capacity constraints on the criminal side. It's just due to very likely we've reached a saturation of interested parties who are interested in getting organized around cargo theft, right? But we've seen increases on all metrics of cargo theft in the U.S. and Canada, whether it's, across a certain product type vertical, they've all seen increases. Whether it's in certain states, they've pretty much all seen increases. They may jockey for position when we're talking about percentage and share of thefts, but, outside of California being number one, but by and large, they've all seen increases in theft. And then when we talk about types of theft, how these thefts are performed, we're seeing massive increases in large scale pilferage, which can include the entire contents of the trailer. Pilferage really just means taking the cargo out of the trailer rather than taking the trailer with it. And strategic theft or fraudulent pickup, goes by several different names, but fraudulent or deceptive theft, right, is one of the things where we're seeing the most gains, the most sophistication, and the most targeting. So I think that's the one right now that's doing the most damage.
Cargo theft by way of deception or fraud has grown so much that Danny says it's nearly outpacing traditional theft of physical assets.
Because the scalability of that type of theft is just not the same as it is with a fraudulent or deceptive type of theft where you're using technology, right? A straight theft, which is the traditional theft, where the entire tractor trailer or at least the trailer is stolen from the rightful driver whenever it's unattended, usually, is still seeing increases as well. But that type of theft, like I mentioned, it's going to take a team of people, usually 3 to 5 people, upwards of a week or more, especially if you're counting intelligence gathering on their end. It's going to take at least a week or more to capture one trailer, to steal one trailer of product. Whereas if you know what you're doing, if you've got a couple of, industry contacts on the bad actor side, you can steal dozens of loads in a day from behind the safety of a keyboard where no one's ever going to see you. You're never going to come into physical contact with a stolen product. And with the proliferation of e-commerce, you can drop ship that to an e-commerce warehouse where it just gets taken into inventory, shipped out as it's ordered, and you're collecting 100% of that profit. You didn't pay for that product. 100% of what you're charging and receiving is then profit margin.
Bad actors are using a number of different fraud strategies to steal cargo. Danny explains what some of those are after a word from 1044 sponsor, Chevron Lubricants.
We serve customers from Birmingham, Alabama to the Gulf Coast, so our people and our trucks are booked solid all day. There is no slack in our schedules. These trucks can't break down. I choose an engine oil that takes care of the number one issue with our engines, emissions, so we don't have to worry about DPF clogging. I choose the engine oil that keeps our trucks hauling. I choose Dello 600 ADF.
So early on, the industry widely referred to this genre of theft as fictitious pickup. And that's because when we first started to see this type of theft in the industry, and we're talking, 10, 12, 15 years ago, fictitious pickup was what was being experienced by and large. And that's very much a social engineering type of theft where somebody has some inside information about, ABC Trucking is supposed to pick up this load at 4:00 on a Friday. Well, you know what? We're going to show up at 2:00 on Friday pretending to be ABC Trucking and saying, hey, we're just trying to get out of here before rush hour, help me out. And people would often help them out. And something like that would often gain them, ideally a weekend's worth of lead time, but even if they only got a few hours worth of lead time, that was all they needed. Now, we've had to broaden the category to strategic theft or theft by deception, theft by fraud, because of the highly varied methods that they use. And they will switch and stack and mix and match these different MOs based on the target that they're pursuing, because they're intimately familiar with all of these logistics operations. They are familiar with the processes and procedures at the origins that they're targeting. They're familiar with the processes and procedures with the destinations, if the destination is going to be involved in their scheme. But some of those schemes can involve falsifying paperwork, the bill of lading, which ends up then being the proof of delivery. Technology has advanced to the point now where you can scan and edit a PDF on your phone, and then you send it to somebody, have it printed out, and you've got a new bill of lading for that truck. And producing a new bill of lading for a trailer full of goods is essentially laundering that freight, because you can mask the original origin, you can mask the intended destination, you can change piece counts and weights and seal numbers on there. So maybe if a destination doesn't have processes in place to check digital BOLs or blockchain-enabled BOLs from the shipper, they're going to take the piece of paper that the driver hands them, and that's gospel to them. If that piece of paper says there's supposed to be 2 pallets on this 53-foot trailer, that's standard practice in some parts of the supply chain, right? So they'll open up a 53-foot trailer and say, 2 pallets, cool, that's what we're supposed to see, and everything's fine as far as they're concerned, when that was actually supposed to be a full trailer with 20 plus, 40 plus pallets on there.
With FMCSA already working to revamp the registration system, how much of an impact will those changes make?
It's absolutely going to make a difference in that, they're going to close some of the low-hanging fruit loopholes, as it is, for these criminals that these criminals are able to exploit. But what it's going to do, and by the time these measures are implemented, these criminals will have moved on to bigger and better tactics. They will have come up with more sophisticated schemes, but that does not mean that we should not take these steps that the FMCSA is going to take. These steps that they're going to take, hopefully including, transparency towards the private sector when we're looking to vet carriers. We need a lot more transparency into the data that the FMCSA has in order to be able to do that effectively. If they do that, if they're able to give us those tools, I think that could actually make a really big difference in the supply chain security landscape.
For fleets, the type of freight being hauled can definitely have an impact on the risk of being targeted by thieves, but the targeted products may not be what you would expect.
It absolutely does, because these thieves are after certain products. But what doesn't matter the way it used to is exactly what products they're pursuing. Because it's not necessarily about a cost-dense product the way it was 5-10 years ago. Now it's about what they can get it for. It's more about demand for that product. How quickly can they liquidate it? Because as I mentioned, it used to be if you were performing straight theft, stealing an entire 53-foot trailer of like product, chances are you're operating within a criminal network where one of the layers in that network is a fence. So that fence is then going to liquidate that entire load all at once, which when you do things like that, you're not getting anywhere near retail or even wholesale value for that as a thief, right? As a thief, you hope you can get maybe 10 or 15% if you're lucky. Now, if you look at the way things are going now, like I mentioned, with e-commerce sites and the ability to just ship overseas in bulk to legitimate buyers over there, buyers who think that they're buying legitimate goods, is increasing the profit margin. So all of a sudden, it's not necessarily how cost dense the product is, it's how in demand it is, how quickly it can be moved, because the thief is going to get a much higher margin for it. I mean, a great example of this is you look at 2020, when all of a sudden we had dozens of truckloads of paper towels and toilet paper being stolen. Not at all cost dense, but in demand.
As Danny mentioned earlier, the cargo theft market, so to speak, is likely near its saturation point. But he and Overhaul expect a growth in the sophistication of thieves and their tactics as 2025 moves along.
We're hoping the criminal networks that are already involved have kind of reached their capacity, right? Now, that doesn't mean that there's not more capacity for more criminals to get involved, and I believe that there is capacity for that, and I believe we're going to see that. How extensive it's going to be, how quickly it's going to happen, I don't know. But what I do know is that we're going to see an increase and a development in the sophistication, in the techniques that these criminals are using for theft by fraud and theft by deception. They're going to come up with new tactics. A lot of it, I have a feeling, is going to involve falsifying paperwork, forging paperwork, doctoring paperwork, because there's a lot of things that can be done around that can throw people off the scent when you're investigating or when you're trying to prevent a theft.
So what can the trucking and logistics industries do to cut down on theft?
There is no silver bullet. There's no one thing that's going to fix everybody's problem. I really wish there was. It'd make my job a lot easier, right? But it comes down to, maintaining your carrier relationships, updating records, and making sure you've got a verified point of contact within each of those carriers. And then beyond that, you're really having a culture of security at the loading dock, making sure that everybody's being vetted properly when they come in. Is this the driver that we were supposed to receive? Is all the signage correct? Are there any red flags? Like, is the license plate zip tied onto the grill at chest height, indicating that maybe it's changed 3 or 4 times a day? Is that coupled also with a magnetic placard on the side of the tractor, indicating that also might be switched out 3 or 4 times a day? Look at the trailer. Does it look like it's had markings spray painted over and new markings put on top of it? Look and see if the bolts on the back of the trailer have been replaced with, or if the rivets have been replaced with nuts and bolts, because that means that they can open it without tampering with the seal. There's all sorts of things you can look at, but it comes down to making sure you're giving your freight to who you think you're giving your freight to. Beyond that, the only thing that can help you is going to be real-time visibility. You need granular visibility into your supply chain to be able to identify patterns of theft or patterns of behavior that indicate theft or fraud while you still have the opportunity to recover it.
For carriers and drivers specifically, one best practice has always been to make sure that the driver can get at least 250 miles from the pickup location before stopping for fuel or rest. But is that still the case in this new age of cargo theft?
It is absolutely still considered best practice. That is still, when straight theft is practiced, it is most often practiced by being followed from origin until it stops and is left unattended. And if it doesn't happen within a certain amount of time, there's a fair chance those thieves are going to turn around and go back and try and find some more low-hanging fruit. That being said, situational awareness is key because it differs where you are and what you're hauling. For example, coming out of California, you hit 200 or 250 miles right as you cross the state line into Arizona. We've seen a massive explosion in thefts in Arizona, specifically for trucks that are leaving the LA basin, the Inland Empire area, because, for several decades at this point, there's been a massive price difference between California and Arizona, which has caused the truck stops just across that border on the Arizona side to have some really fantastic amenities for truckers, which means it's a very desirable destination. Well, the thieves know this, right? So their network, what they're doing is they're setting up scouts at the origin sites who will identify targets, communicate the information about these targets to their accomplices who they have waiting, in Lake Havasu or in Kingman, Arizona, where a lot of these high amenity truck stops are, and they're going to pick up the trail there. That, in effect, almost creates a new red zone starting at the California-Arizona border. Operationally, we can't realistically ask people to not stop from LA until they get to New Mexico. And even if we did, considering the way these thefts are happening, that would only move the hotspot to New Mexico. Eventually, right? We're kicking the can at this point. So really it comes down to there's no magic bullet. It's going to take a security mindset from the top down and the bottom up to make sure that your freight is secure, coupled with, all the layers that you can afford to install on your supply chain, topmost being visibility. So the location, the condition, the whereabouts of your cargo at any given time.
That's it for this week's 1044. You can read more on ccjdigital.com. While you're there, sign up for our newsletter and stay up to date on the latest in trucking industry news and trends. If you have any questions or feedback, please let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you can catch us again next week.